There are a great many things in the world that we talk about as if they were real, but they are just only judgments. You know, the only difference between a flower and a weed is a judgment, and that's true of people as well. Here's some things that don't exist in the world. Disasters, luck, a dumb bird, a normal attitude, a guarantee, a dreadful dress, a gorgeous hairdo, terrible language, a nice lady, an awful sight, a good boy, a stupid person. These are all judgments. And you have to learn the difference between judging and what is real. Some of the categories of where people dichotomize and judge are good and bad. They try to put the whole world into what is good and what is bad based upon some perception I have. And those things that don't fit into it the way I think they ought to be are bad, and all the things that I agree with are good. And so you find yourself going through your whole life running into half of the people or more who are doing things in a different way than you do and judging them all to be bad, and therefore being their victim because they now own your emotional strings. Remember, being a victim isn't necessarily a physical thing. In fact, that's very seldom the thing, because we have laws to protect each other from being physically abused by each other. It isn't as if somebody's putting you into a jail, into a cell. It is the victimization is what you experience in your mind and in your emotions. And this comes from judging, from categorizing, from compartmentalizing people and putting them into the compartments. And then when they don't fit with the behavior that you think they should exhibit, you find yourself upset and worked up and angry and hurt. Good and bad and right and wrong and beautiful and ugly. There's no beautiful people in the world. There's no ugly people in the world. People are just the way they are. They look exactly the way they do, the way they're supposed to look. They're part of the perfect intelligence that is in all things in the universe, that invisible intelligence that is within all of us. But if you categorize people that way, then you are finding yourself potentially a victim. It's really important to develop a quiet mind when it comes to all of this. A quiet mind is a mind that is at peace, a mind that doesn't judge. One of the things you learn about judgment is that you do not define anybody else with your judgments. You only define yourself as someone who needs to judge. Just because you label somebody else to be something obnoxious or nasty or hurtful doesn't mean that that's what they are. That's just your judgment, and that's your definition of yourself as someone who needs to judge. People are not defined by your judgments. People are defined by their own thoughts and their own actions that are subsequent to those thoughts. So learning not to judge and unclogging your mind, if you will, of judgments and negativity and quieting your mind. It's like if you could spend an hour a day in meditation. The great French philosopher and scientist Pascal said that all of man's troubles stem from his inability to sit quietly in a room alone. You sit quietly in a room alone and go within and discover that higher consciousness, whatever you want to call it, whether you call it God or soul or spirit or Louise, it doesn't make any difference what you label it. If you go within and discover that and spend time each day inside of yourself, just peacefully being there and asking the questions, how may I serve? And what is my purpose? And what can I do to make this life a better one? And how can I serve people rather than be victimized by them or victimizing anybody else? You find that developing that kind of a quiet, peaceful, serene mind is something that will allow you to process the whole world in a more peaceful way. And when you get to that point where you are aligning yourself spiritually, or you are aligning yourself with the invisible part of your humanity, the part that defies form, that doesn't begin and doesn't end, when you align yourself there, and that becomes your first priority, you start noticing that you don't get victimized as much. I've really noticed that as I've gotten myself on a higher spiritual path and a more peaceful path for myself and more at ease with myself, that I've begun to take much better care of my body, that I notice that when I don't expect people to be abusive towards me, that I hardly ever see it anymore. It's really rare that I see it. I know that when I get in the car and I have a 17-mile ride to go to my home from my office, and there's a lot of traffic lights and there's a lot of traffic and a lot of slow drivers and so on, I know that when I visualize in advance in my mind that this is going to be a very pleasant experience, and I see myself, if somebody's cutting me off in advance, that I see myself not allowing myself to be upset and depressed by that. I see myself going through that whole process of driving all the way home in advance. This is before I've even opened the car. And I sort of play it out in my mind. And then I get in and I just allow the physical now to follow the thought that I just had, the visualization that I just had. And sure enough, somebody will get in there and cut me off or drive slowly or whatever. And for me, it's like I just see them as part of the perfection of it all. They're exactly where they're supposed to be at that moment. I'm no longer a victim. I have aligned myself first with my mind, knowing that I can create in my mind what I want, and then not allowing myself to be victimized when those things occur. And as I do that, I go through my life, I find that as I am more peaceful and I send out more harmony and more love and more forgiveness and more kindness and more of all the things I've been talking about on this tape, if you send that out more, that's what you get back. If you send out hostility and pain and suffering and anger and wanting to make other people wrong and wanting to prove yourself all the time, if you send out that kind of energy from yourself, that's exactly what you're going to get back. Send out love, you'll get back love. Send out anger and impatience, and that's what you'll get. Pulling your own strings truly is about looking within and knowing that no one can make you a victim without your consent. No one.
There is a stillness in you that cannot be disturbed, a place untouched by fear, unshaken by chaos, and immune to the noise of the world. It has no name, yet it knows everything. It has no shape, yet it holds the shape of your peace. It is not your mind, for your mind is loud. It is not your emotions, for your emotions are waves. It is not your body, for the body withers and bends to time. It is the part of you that watches quietly, lovingly, unmoved. And in that watching, there is power. We spend most of our lives reacting to what was said, to what wasn't said, to the look someone gave, to the news flashing across our screens, to the stories we carry like old, worn clothes, too heavy to wear, but too familiar to take off. We live at the mercy of our interpretations, our wounds, our replays of the past and projections of the future. We live, but we do not watch. We act, but we do not see. To watch is not to detach from life, it is to arrive fully in it. It is to stop being dragged by the stream of every emotion and every judgment. It is to sit at the edge of the river and say, there it is again, the fear, the anger, the memory, the story, and then let it flow. The ego is a brilliant but frantic storyteller. It cannot live in the present moment because the present moment exposes its illusions. It thrives on reaction because it feeds on control. The ego needs your agreement. It needs your reactivity to survive. But your soul does not need to prove itself. It simply is. It observes without trying to fix. It accepts without needing to justify. It loves without asking to be loved back. Being the watcher is not an escape, it is the return. When you become the watcher, you are no longer the puppet of your past. You are no longer the hostage of your triggers. You begin to see that the anger is not you, it is an energy that passes through. The grief is not you, it is a wave that visits, not a house you must live in. The fear is not you, it is a voice, not your truth. There is a sacred gap between stimulus and response. And in that gap is where you reclaim your life. That gap is where the watcher lives. You are not your reactions. You are the awareness beneath them. You are not your thoughts. You are the spaciousness that notices them arise and fall. You are not the chaos. You are the calm watching the chaos. And when you remember this, you become free. Freedom doesn't come when the world is silent. It comes when you can hear the noise and choose not to be it. It comes when you can feel the heat of anger and not throw it. When you can taste the sting of offense and not become offended. When you can sit in the storm of opinion and not get swept away by any of it. There is no greater strength than presence. To be present is to live beyond reaction. It is to let go of the idea that everything demands your emotional involvement. It is to allow people to be who they are without needing to correct them. It is to hear a criticism and not make it your identity. It is to receive praise and not build your worth upon it. Presence is not passive. It is alert, grounded, alive. The watcher is not distant. The watcher is compassionate. It sees clearly because it does not cling. It understands deeply because it listens without defense. It acts with power because it does not act from fear. You see, when you become the watcher, life softens. Not because life changes, but because you do. The same situations arise, but they no longer own you. The same people trigger the same old patterns, but now you recognize them as patterns, not as truth. You stop bleeding into every moment. You stop needing everything to validate your sense of self. You return to your inner sanctuary, the place where your soul sits with open hands and a quiet smile, knowing that all things are passing clouds. You cannot stop the world from shouting, but you can stop yourself from echoing it. Buddha once said, "You will not be punished for your anger, you will be punished by your anger." And how often we let our own reactivity become the very suffering we try to avoid. We mistake reaction for power, but reaction is bondage. Reaction is the ego's way of staying alive. True power is in the pause. True power is in the breath that says, "I see you, emotion, but I do not belong to you." The watcher doesn't suppress, it doesn't deny, it simply sees, and in seeing, it liberates. Watch yourself when you're offended. Who is it that feels so injured? Is it your soul, or is it an identity you've built, now threatened by someone else's opinion? Watch your defensiveness. Who is it defending? The truth needs no defense. The ego, however, is always on guard. Watch your craving for validation. Who is it that wants to be seen? The infinite spirit within you is already seen. It is seen by the entire universe. There is nothing you need to prove. Nothing you need to fix to be enough. Nothing you need to hold on to be safe. The watcher knows this. The reactor forgets. Let your breath be your teacher. When it quickens, when it shortens, when it tightens, that is the moment to return. That is the moment to step out of the role and back into the witness. Each inhale is a choice. Each exhale is a letting go. The more you breathe consciously, the more you become aware. And awareness is the birthplace of all transformation. When you are the watcher, you stop needing life to behave the way you want it to. You stop arguing with reality. You stop insisting that people be different to make you happy. You stop controlling what was never yours to control. And in this surrender, you find peace not as an achievement, but as your original nature. Peace is not something you chase. Peace is what remains when you stop reacting. So many of us live on the edge of offense. We're ready to be hurt, ready to be insulted, ready to be outraged. We've trained ourselves to scan for threat, not physical threat, but psychological threat. Someone disagrees with us and we feel erased. Someone rejects us and we feel unworthy. But what if none of it was personal? What if every offense is an invitation to awaken? You are not what others say to you. You are what you choose to hear. Let people misunderstand you. Let them mislabel you. Let them walk away if they must. The watcher does not flinch. The watcher knows that the truth doesn't need to chase anything. The truth just is. And if someone cannot see you, that does not make you invisible. If someone rejects you, that does not make you invalid. You are not here to be understood. You are here to understand. The moment you stop needing to react, you begin to live. You begin to notice the small joys, the way the sunlight touches the leaves, the pause between two heartbeats, the sacred silence after a deep breath. These are the spaces where the divine speaks, but you must be still enough to hear. And stillness does not mean inactivity. Stillness is presence. It is clarity. It is the quiet power of a soul unbothered by the noise. You have nothing to defend, no argument to win, no ego to preserve. You have only the opportunity in every moment to return to the watcher within. So next time you feel the rise of reaction, pause, breathe, watch. You are not the storm. You are the sky. The sky does not tremble when clouds pass through it. It does not cling to the rain or resist the lightning. It allows, it witnesses, it remains, and so must you. Your true self, the eternal witness, has never been broken, never been threatened, never been less than whole. It is only the ego that flinches, that crumbles, that begs for validation in the eyes of others. The soul simply watches and waits, knowing the truth is never in the noise. Every time you choose to observe rather than react, you are retraining your consciousness. You are shifting the gravity of your identity from the external to the internal, from fear to love, from protection to presence. You become like the ocean, watching its own waves rise and fall, but never mistaking the waves for its essence. The turbulence no longer defines you. The stillness beneath becomes your home. There is a moment brief but sacred when awareness interrupts a habit. That moment is a portal to liberation. A chance to say, I see it, I've been here before, but this time I choose differently. And in that subtle shift, your entire life begins to change. Not because the world softens, but because you no longer harden in its presence. You stop armoring up every time someone looks at you the wrong way. You stop bracing for judgment. You begin to live unclenched, wide open, deeply rooted, and profoundly present. And isn't that what true power is? To be unshakable, not because you dominate, but because you no longer need to defend. To be calm in the midst of fire. To be kind without condition. To be aware of the storm and yet centered in your stillness. This is the life of the awakened. Not free of conflict, but free of entanglement. Not void of feeling, but void of control by those feelings. When you stop reacting, you begin seeing. You see the other person not as an enemy, but as a mirror. You see your anger not as a truth, but as a message. You see your triggers as teachers. You see life not as a series of attacks, but as a series of invitations to evolve. You begin to understand that everything that once made you flinch is here to make you free. The reactive self is a prisoner of the past. It is stitched together by old wounds, unconscious stories, and inherited beliefs. It's constantly trying to protect something, a fragile image, a constructed identity, a false sense of self. But the watcher knows there is nothing to protect because the soul is not a character. The soul cannot be injured by opinion, it cannot be destroyed by loss, it cannot be undone by time. You are not your conditioning, you are not your defense mechanisms, you are not the fight or flight impulse that flares up when things don't go your way. You are the one who sees it all. And in seeing it all, you are no longer owned by any of it. Have you ever felt the weight of a reaction coming, the anger bubbling, the heart racing, the story forming, and then you paused, you breathed, you watched, and just like that, the charge softened. That is presence. That is awakening. That is what it means to remember yourself in the heat of forgetting. It's not about never feeling triggered. It's about no longer being tricked into believing those triggers define you. It's not about being a stone cold and unfeeling. It's about being a mountain still and grounded, even as the winds howl around you. You see, the more you watch without reacting, the more you begin to trust life again. You realize that not every comment needs a comeback. Not every situation demands your opinion. Not every disagreement is a battlefield. You stop entering every interaction with armor. You stop needing the last word. You begin to understand that silence can be the loudest answer. That stillness can be the most powerful presence. And in that space, that holy space between what happened and how you choose to respond, a miracle occurs. The miracle of self-possession, of divine clarity, of peace that cannot be disturbed by anything outside of you. You no longer live from habit, you live from intention. You begin to meet life with eyes open, heart soft, and soul steady. The reactive mind is always chasing approval, chasing control, chasing an identity it can hold on to. But the watcher knows there is nothing to chase when you already are. You are not here to be everything to everyone. You are here to be fully awake in yourself. To be so deeply rooted in your presence that even if the world misreads you, misunderstands you, misjudges you, you stay true. Truth needs no audience. Presence needs no applause. The divine in you needs no permission. And so I invite you, not tomorrow, not someday, but in this very moment, to pause. Let the breath remind you of the eternal now. Let the silence return you to the sacred watcher. Let the witness within you rise. And from that space, observe. Observe your thoughts without clinging. Observe your emotions without dramatizing. Observe your life without rushing to fix, correct, or judge. This is not the end of your spiritual path. This is the beginning. Because when you become the watcher, everything changes. Not by force, but by frequency. You stop vibrating at the level of the problem and begin rising into the solution. You stop looking for healing in others and start embodying it within yourself. You stop playing the role of the victim or the hero and simply become real. And in your realness, your grounded, divine, conscious presence, you begin to heal not just yourself, but everyone you touch. Not through preaching, not through trying, but simply through being. Being the space, being the peace, being the clarity in a world addicted to confusion. You are not here to be tossed around by life. You are here to be the still point, the silent flame, the breath between the chaos. And you'll know when you found this place, not because life gets easier, but because you stop collapsing in front of it. Your center becomes unshakable. Your peace becomes non-negotiable. Your love becomes unconditional. And from this space, my friend, everything becomes possible. And from this space, my friend, everything becomes possible. When you no longer live at the mercy of your reactions, you step into the rarest kind of power, the power of inner authority. Not dominance, not superiority, but sovereignty of the soul. You're no longer pulled by every emotional wind, no longer yanked into battles that aren't yours. You become a space of presence that others can feel but cannot disturb. You begin to hear the world, not just through your ears, but through your spirit. Someone may yell, and you hear their pain. Someone may judge, and you hear their fear. Someone may try to provoke, and you sense their longing for love. The watcher sees this, not to become better than anyone, but to remember none of it is about you. And what a relief that is. What a deep, cleansing sigh for the soul to know you are not responsible for the storms in other people's skies. You are only responsible for whether you bring your umbrella or your sunshine, whether you enter their storm or remain the calm that invites them into clarity. To live as the watcher is not to become indifferent, it's to become deeply compassionate without losing yourself. Compassion doesn't require you to abandon your peace. In fact, real compassion flows from peace. When you react, you join others in their suffering. But when you watch, you become the mirror that reflects something higher. You say without words, you don't have to live like that. There's another way. And when you live this way, something extraordinary happens. You begin to radiate peace. Not the kind that looks peaceful on the outside, but simmers with resentment underneath. Not the kind that avoids conflict by shrinking. No, this is the peace that walks into any room and changes its atmosphere. The peace that speaks without words. The peace that silences chaos just by being. Because when you are no longer at war with yourself, the world cannot drag you into battle. You stop arguing with reality. You stop trying to edit the universe to match your preferences. You stop needing the moment to be anything other than what it is. And in that surrender, you don't become passive, you become present. You take action, not from desperation, but from alignment. You speak, not to defend, but to express love. You listen, not to prepare your reply, but to understand with your whole being. This is how the soul moves. Gently, powerfully, without rush, and oh, how the world needs more of this. More beings who don't crumble at conflict, who don't lose themselves trying to win approval, who aren't addicted to proving they're right. The world is loud with reactions. Be the one who is quiet with understanding. Be the one who slows down when others speed up. Be the one who chooses grace when the ego demands retaliation. There is a river inside you that has never stopped flowing. Even when you were tangled in your thoughts, even when you believed the voice of fear, even when you reacted with anger, shame, or pride, that river was always there, steady, ancient, divine. It is your true nature. The watcher lives there. The soul drinks from it. And your freedom begins the moment you return to its banks. So when you feel yourself being pulled into the story, the fight, the trigger, the need to explain, the craving to be seen, pause. Let the breath return you. Let your awareness remind you. Let the watcher reclaim the moment, because life isn't about avoiding the waves, it's about learning to surf them with awareness. It's about realizing that no matter what chaos dances across the surface, the depths of who you are remain unmoved. That is your home. That is your truth. That is the part of you that has never been hurt, never been lost, never been less than divine. And when you live from that place, when your identity is rooted not in ego but in soul, then your presence becomes medicine. You don't have to fix everyone. You don't have to save the world. You don't even have to change anyone's mind. Just be what you are when you're not reacting. Light, calm, truth, stillness. That is enough. More than enough. That is the invitation you offer the world. Come sit with me in this silence and remember who you are. And if they do, beautiful. And if they don't, you continue walking, not in pride, not in bitterness, but in peace. Because the watcher walks with grace. And grace, my friend, is the only power that doesn't need to shout. The watcher walks with grace, not because it is immune to pain, but because it no longer mistakes pain for identity. It has learned the sacred art of presence, not as a performance, but as a remembrance. To watch is to love without possession, to listen without preparing to speak, to live without the weight of needing everything to be different in order to be okay. And when you live like this, when you truly become the watcher, the need to be understood falls away. You no longer plead with the world to see you, to validate you, to applaud your efforts. You know that to be seen by the divine within you is more than enough. You feel the presence of the infinite, not as something to chase, but as something that never left. Something that was always whispering beneath your reaction. You are not this storm. You are the sky. It passes through. And in this realization, you soften. You stop bracing for impact. You stop rehearsing pain. You stop living from the haunted echoes of what if and what was. You rest not in exhaustion, but in awakening. You stop trying to control what's never been yours, and instead surrender to the stillness that has always been home. You forgive yourself for every time you believe the lie that you were only as worthy as your performance, only as loved as your usefulness, only as safe as your defenses. You forgive yourself for the times you reacted, for the times you fell into fear, for the times you said what your soul never meant, not because it was right, but because you are ready to be free. Forgiveness, too, is an act of watching, of saying, yes, I see the wound, but I also see who I truly am beyond it. And then something quiet but life-altering begins to happen. You stop waiting for permission to be at peace. You stop postponing joy until circumstances align. You stop bargaining with life. If this happens, then I'll feel whole. No. Wholeness is now, peace is now, God is now. Everything you've been chasing while reacting was always sitting silently in the sanctuary of your awareness. The watcher knows that time is not the answer, presence is. You don't need another year to become what your soul already is. You don't need more proof, more agreement, more applause. You need only this breath, this stillness, this radical return to the center that has never abandoned you. And this is not a theory, this is an embodiment. When you embody the watcher, your life becomes less about performance and more about presence. You start speaking less. and saying more. You start needing less and feeling fuller. You begin walking through the world with a softness that doesn't ask, "Do you accept me?" but instead radiates, "I accept myself." And because you accept yourself, others feel safe to do the same in your presence. Your being becomes a sanctuary, your silence becomes sacred. You no longer react to prove your worth, you respond from the overflow of your awareness. That's how the divine speaks. Not to convince, but to awaken. Not to correct, but to reflect. You begin to realize that every trigger was a teacher, and every interruption was an initiation. That the very moments which once made you spiral were not obstacles, they were sacred doorways. Doorways leading you deeper into the witness, deeper into grace, deeper into the stillness that does not flinch, does not fight, and does not fear. And now, you are ready. Not ready to achieve something, not ready to prove anything, but ready to finally live, not from the ego's urgency, but from the soul's timelessness. Ready to meet the day, not as a battle, but as a blessing. Ready to hold space instead of hold grudges. Ready to watch your thoughts pass like clouds and realize you are the sky. You always were. The world may still swirl, people may still project, but you now walk as the calm inside the center of it all. And when old reactions try to rise, because they will, you'll meet them with compassion, not condemnation. You'll greet them like old friends with fading power, saying gently, "I see you, but I no longer serve you." And in that moment, you will smile, not because life is perfect, but because you have remembered who you are. You are not the fear. You are not the noise. You are not the ego's constant commentary. You are the one who watches all of it and chooses love anyway. So breathe, beloved soul. Breathe and return to this sacred moment, to this steady presence, to this watcher that does not need to win, but only needs to witness. Let others shout. Let the world race. Let the noise unfold. You just keep watching. Just keep loving, because when you are the watcher, not the reactor, you do not just change your life. You remember that you are life. And life, in its truest form, does not react. It flows. It trusts, it shines, and so do you. In a world that never stops moving, stillness becomes the rarest form of wisdom. We are taught to chase, to climb, to hustle, to conquer, but the soul, your eternal essence, is not impressed by noise. It doesn't race, it doesn't strive, it doesn't scream, it whispers. And in the hush between your thoughts, in the quiet after the questions, that's where the soul begins to speak. Clarity is not something you achieve, it's something you remember. You were born with it, wrapped in simplicity, bathed in presence, untouched by confusion. But as the world's volume turned up, as expectations piled upon you, like bricks on the chest of your spirit, the clarity was buried beneath it all. Not lost, just waiting. Waiting for you to be still enough to feel it again. Stillness is not the absence of movement. It is the presence of awareness. It is the moment when you are no longer doing life, but being life. And in that being, the fog lifts. You begin to see, not with the eyes, but with the heart. Not with logic, but with knowing. The kind of knowing that doesn't require proof because it is truth. Most people confuse clarity with answers. They think they'll feel clear once they figure it all out, once the past is explained, the future guaranteed, the pain justified. But clarity is not born in solving. It is born in surrender. When you stop clenching the steering wheel of your life so tightly, when you stop demanding certainty from an uncertain world, something miraculous happens, peace walks in. And where peace goes, clarity follows. Let us remember the truth known by sages and saints. You are not here to figure life out. You are here to feel it, to open to it, to soften into it like water returning to the sea. The need for control is the ego's obsession, but the soul has no such hunger. It doesn't need to control. It already belongs. It doesn't need to prove it already is. It doesn't need to race. It already rests. Your inner chaos is not because life is chaotic. It's because you've been avoiding the sacred space within you, the silence. You've been filling every crack in your day with noise, distraction, validation. But clarity doesn't rise through effort. It rises through stillness. It doesn't come from pushing. It comes from pausing. And in that pause, you meet yourself again. You were never meant to carry the world on your shoulders. The world is not yours to control. It's yours to experience, to love, to witness, and to let pass through you like wind through an open field. When you sit in stillness, you remember this. You remember that life is not a storm to be survived, but a breeze to be felt. And in feeling it fully, you return to the truth that you were never disconnected, just distracted. Distraction is the greatest thief of clarity, not because it takes something from you, but because it turns your gaze away from what was always there. Like the sun hidden behind clouds, your light never left. It was only obscured by thought, fear, busyness. And when you finally get still, the clouds part, not all at once, but gently, respectfully, like a curtain rising to reveal your own divinity waiting patiently behind the veil. The stillness does not shout, it does not force, it invites, and it waits, always waits for you to accept. Not when the to-do list is done, not when the circumstances are perfect, but now in the breath you are taking, now in the space between your thoughts, now in the sacred pause where the mind rests and the soul wakes. And in this waking, something changes. You stop asking life to be different. You stop begging the moment to become something else. You begin instead to listen. To listen not with your ears, but with your entire being. You begin to hear the language of the soul, the language of stillness, and it tells you what no amount of striving could ever reveal. That you are safe, that you are loved, that you are already whole. Stillness is not a task. It is a homecoming. A return, a remembrance of who you were before the world told you who you should be. It is the falling away of every label, every mask, every identity constructed from fear. And as it all falls, what remains is essence. What remains is God not outside you, but in you. As you, moving through you, breathing you, being you. And in this sacred space, clarity is no longer something you seek. It becomes what you are. Let the world keep spinning. Let the chaos outside dance its wild, unpredictable dance. You don't need to control the storm. You only need to find the eye of it, the center. And that center is always still, that center is always you. So sit, breathe, be, and in that stillness, let the illusions dissolve. Let the old stories, the ones that said you're not enough, not worthy, not capable, let them fall like leaves in autumn, no longer needed for the soul's blooming. You are not your past. You are not your fear. You are not the noise of the world. You are the silence beneath it. You are the space between the notes, the rhythm that gives the music its meaning. You see now why clarity cannot be forced? Why it resists the grasping of the mind and instead flows through the openness of the heart? Because clarity is not information, it is transformation. It does not fill you, it empties you. And in that emptiness, you finally feel light enough to rise. You become like a feather surrendered to the wind, not passive, not powerless, but free. Free from the illusion that you need to have it all figured out. Free from the belief that healing requires effort. Free from the ego's insistence that you must earn peace. You don't earn peace, you return to it. You don't achieve clarity, you allow it. And all of it begins in stillness. So if you are weary, sit. If you are confused, sit. If you are broken, grieving, lost, overwhelmed, sit. Not to escape, not to avoid, but to arrive. Stillness is the most radical arrival. It is where you meet life without agenda, where you stop trying to be anything and remember you are already everything. In stillness, the soul speaks, and it speaks in a language beyond words, a language made of feeling, of knowing, of being. And what it whispers is this: you are already home. What if the very thing you've been searching for has been searching for you too, not in the noise, not in the chase, but in the quiet you keep avoiding? What if stillness is not just a spiritual practice, but a doorway, a sacred threshold where the divine and the human meet, where the veil thins and truth is no longer something you read about, but something you feel vibrating through the marrow of your being? There's a reason the great mystics sat in silence. There's a reason the prophets wandered the desert. There's a reason the sages withdrew from the noise of cities and climbed mountains to find God. It's not because the divine is far. It's because the world is loud, too loud to hear the subtle beauty of the eternal that whispers from within, too loud to feel the sacred pulse of presence moving in every breath, too loud to hear the soul say, I'm still here. I never left. You just forgot how to listen. You don't need a new path. You need a deeper presence. You don't need to run forward. You need to fall inward, into the holy quiet where your spirit waits patiently behind the storm of your thoughts, into the inner sanctuary where truth does not arrive dressed in certainty, but in peace. And that peace, that gentle presence, is the language of clarity. It does not bark orders or deliver perfect blueprints. It simply clears the debris so the light can shine again. And you have always been that light. The confusion, the anxiety, the overthinking, those are just clouds. And clouds, no matter how dark, can never extinguish the sun. The sun just waits. Still, constant, glowing behind the storm, your soul is that sun. Not in need of fixing, just waiting to be seen again. The world has conditioned you to think answers are earned by effort, that truth is something you must chase, something out there just beyond your reach. But the spiritual life is not about chasing anything. It is about remembering what is already within. It is the sacred reversal, the path not of gaining, but of shedding, of unlearning the noise. So you can return to the knowing. And it takes courage to be still. It takes courage to stop distracting yourself with the next thing, the next goal, the next identity. Because when you finally sit in silence, you meet yourself, not the self you show the world, not the self you've polished and performed, but the raw, trembling, holy self that has been whispering beneath the surface all along. Stillness is not easy. It confronts, it reveals, it humbles, it strips away everything that is false. It forces you to see the parts of yourself you've buried beneath achievement and validation. But it is in this seeing, this honest, sacred witnessing, that you begin to return home. And that homecoming is clarity. Not the clarity that gives you all the answers, but the clarity that says, you don't need them, you already are the answer. There's a kind of wisdom that lives in the quiet. It cannot be found in books or sermons or lectures. It is not taught, it is remembered. It is the wisdom of the trees that do not try to grow, but grow. The rivers that do not try to flow, but flow. The stars that do not try to shine, but shine. What makes them divine is not effort, but essence. And what makes you divine is not your doing, but your being. You are the tree, you are the river, you are the star, and you are never more aligned with the truth of life than when you are still enough to simply be. Sit with that. Let it break open the armor of your striving. Let it dissolve the illusion that your worth is somewhere ahead of you. Let it remind you that clarity is not the reward for working harder, but the revelation that comes when you finally stop. And the moment you stop, truly stop, you start to see, you see that your worth has never been in your productivity, that your value has never been in your accomplishments, that your purpose is not something you chase, but something you remember. And what you remember in the stillness is this: you are already whole. You are already held. You are already here. And here is where everything begins. When the mind gets quiet, the heart begins to speak. And it speaks in a different language, a softer one. It doesn't argue or compare or worry. It doesn't say when or if or someday. It says now. It says yes. It says I am. And this I am is the most powerful prayer you will ever whisper. It is not a begging of life to become something else. It is a full-bodied return to what already is. It is the dissolving of ego into essence. It is the surrender of resistance into rest. It is the moment you stop pushing the river and let yourself be carried. So sit. Sit like the mountain sits. Sit like the moon watches. Sit like the ocean waits. Not to escape life, but to merge with it. To merge with the still, unshaken, eternal pulse that has always been inside you. Clarity does not always come in lightning bolts. Sometimes it arrives like dew, soft, slow, and silent, but it nourishes, it renews, it awakens the parts of you that were never dead, just dormant. And in that awakening, you come alive, not as someone else, but as more fully yourself. There is no rush, there is only rhythm, the rhythm of breath, the rhythm of being, the rhythm of love that has no opposite, because it was never conditional. The stillness teaches this. It shows you that underneath all your trying is a truth that never needed to be earned. You are the clarity. You are the peace. You are the stillness. And when you stop long enough to feel that, not just understand it, but truly feel it, you begin to live, not from fear, but from presence. Not from need, but from fullness. Not from ego, but from soul. And the soul, the soul does not rush. The soul knows. The soul flows. The soul rests in the silence because it remembers what the mind forgets, that God is not somewhere else. God is here in the stillness, in the breath, in the now. There's something sacred about silence that terrifies the ego. The ego feeds on noise, on proving, achieving, calculating, defending. But the soul is nourished by stillness. The soul doesn't compete. It doesn't grasp or argue, it simply is. It breathes with the universe. It aligns with the eternal. It remembers. And the more you allow yourself to be still, the more you realize how loud your life had become. Not just in volume, but in expectation. Every moment stacked with demands, every thought laced with pressure, every breath taken like it had to accomplish something. But stillness says otherwise. Stillness says, come as you are, let go of the armor, lay down the need to be more than you are in this moment. It's enough. You're enough. You see, clarity doesn't need you to be perfect. It only needs you to be present. Present enough to witness what's been underneath all along. Not the story of who you think you are, but the truth of what you've always been. The presence behind the personality, the awareness behind the thoughts, the light behind the identity. When you return to stillness, you return to yourself. Not the self shaped by fear or comparison or past wounds, but the self with a capital S, the infinite spark that existed before the world had a name for you. And that spark doesn't flicker, it burns steady. Even when the mind is in chaos, the soul remains calm. Even when life is uncertain, the spirit stays whole. But we forget. We get caught in the swirl. We mistake the turbulence of our thoughts for the truth of our being. And in that forgetting, we suffer. We chase things that cannot fill us. We climb ladders that lead nowhere. We try to quiet the noise with more noise. But the answer has never changed. The way home has never moved. It waits, always waits in the quiet. So sit in the discomfort if it's there. Sit in the emptiness if that's what rises. Sit even when the mind screams that you should be doing something, especially then. Because the moment you stop running from yourself is the moment you begin to heal. Stillness is not passive. It is the most radical form of alignment. It is choosing to return when the world tells you to run. It is saying, I trust the silence more than the shouting. And in that trust, clarity emerges. not as a lightning strike, but as a soft unfolding like petals opening to the sun, one breath at a time. Do you feel it? That gentle remembering that you don't have to strive to be worthy? That quiet hum beneath your rib cage that says you're not broken, just buried? That sacred pull inward that whispers, stop trying, just be? That's clarity rising. That's your soul stepping forward after years of waiting for you to pause, to listen, to come home. Because the soul cannot shout over the ego. It will never fight for your attention. It will simply wait. It will wait while you exhaust yourself with proving. It will wait while you perform for love. It will wait while you carry burdens that were never yours to carry. And when you finally put them down, when you sit in the stillness long enough to hear the silence, it will gently say, welcome back. There is no punishment for forgetting, only pain. The pain of being disconnected from your own light. But that pain too is a teacher. It is not here to destroy you. It is here to guide you not toward more doing, but toward deeper being. Every ache, every doubt, every unraveling moment is a breadcrumb leading you back to the stillness where clarity lives. And when you enter that space, something sacred happens. You stop asking life for explanations. You stop begging the universe to make it make sense. You begin instead to trust, not because you have the answers, but because you no longer need them. You begin to feel the subtle but unshakable truth that you are guided, that you are carried, that you are enough. The world outside may still be loud, but the world within becomes your sanctuary. And from that sanctuary, everything changes. Not because life changes, but because you see it differently. You see it through the eyes of presence, through the lens of love, through the truth of your soul, which was never confused, only unheard. And so you walk differently. You speak with more softness. You listen with more depth. You move with more grace. Not because you're trying to be spiritual, but because you're no longer trying to be anything else. You are finally being what you are, a sacred thread in the fabric of existence, a note in the great song of creation, a soul remembering its light. Stillness teaches you that nothing is missing, that you don't need to chase alignment. You need only remove the noise that's hiding it. You don't need to create purpose. You need only feel the pulse of it that's always been within you. Let go of the idea that clarity is something to be earned. It is not a prize. It is a presence. It arises when you are brave enough to stop, open enough to listen, soft enough to feel. It flows in like a tide, not when you command it, but when you invite it. And it washes away everything that was never true. In the stillness, illusions dissolve, masks fall, armor melts. You become transparent to yourself, and in that transparency, there is nothing left to defend, nothing left to fix, nothing left to prove. There is only truth, and the truth is that you are already whole. You always have been. Stillness does not change your life by adding more to it. It changes your life by taking away what never belonged. The false urgency, the inherited fear, the borrowed dreams, the narratives handed to you by a world that confused motion from meaning. Stillness is the great purifier. It doesn't decorate the cage, it dissolves it. And what's left when the cage dissolves? Freedom. The kind of freedom that doesn't shout or need permission. The kind of freedom that doesn't come with flags or declarations. The kind of freedom that lives in your breath. Quiet, sacred, unmistakable. It's the freedom of no longer being pulled in 1,000 directions. The freedom of finally hearing your own voice again after years of listening to everyone else's. The freedom of remembering that you are allowed to choose peace over performance. When you begin to live from stillness, you no longer crave validation in the same way. You no longer bend yourself into versions that fit the room. You no longer ask people to fill the void that only presence can hold. Because you've tasted something deeper. You've touched the well beneath the world's thirst. You've returned to the source, not in theory, but in living, breathing reality. And from that place, everything changes. You love without attachment. You speak without trying to impress. You listen without waiting to respond. You no longer react, you respond, because you are no longer driven by unconscious stories. You are awake now, rooted, still. Clarity strips away the unnecessary. It reveals the essence. And when you see with essence, you don't just see more clearly, you see more kindly. You look at your pain with tenderness instead of judgment. You hold your past with compassion instead of shame. You see other people's anger as fear, their cruelty as confusion, their arrogance as woundedness. And you forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you do. Stillness births this kind of clarity. Not the kind that just makes decisions easier, but the kind that makes the heart softer. The kind that lets you walk through the same world, but with entirely new eyes, eyes that see through illusion, that recognize divine patterns in chaos, that find peace not in the absence of noise, but in the presence of awareness. There is a sacred intelligence moving through this universe. Call it God, call it source, call it life. It is not random, it is not cruel, it is precise, gentle, profoundly aware of what your soul came here to remember. But it doesn't force you, it invites you. It will not wrestle your will to the ground. It will wait, and it waits in the quiet. You want to know who you are? Then be still. Don't just sit with the question. Become the space that no longer needs to ask. That's what stillness does. It doesn't answer your questions, it dissolves them. It doesn't fix your brokenness, it reveals that you were never broken. It doesn't give you new ideas, it clears the fog so truth can rise. Like the sun rising not because it's told to, but because it's what it does. You are not here to be a performer on life's stage. You are not here to be constantly visible, constantly relevant, constantly productive. You are here to be real, to be awake, to be so rooted in truth that nothing outside you has the power to uproot you. And that kind of rootedness comes not from willpower, but from stillness. It's in stillness that you remember the rhythm of life, the inhale and exhale, the expansion and the return, the rise and the rest. You were never meant to run endlessly forward. You were designed to pause, to reflect, to listen, to let the tide carry you back inward before you reach again outward. The clarity that comes in stillness is not about making better plans. It's about no longer needing a plan to feel safe. It's about trusting the unfolding, about letting go of your white-knuckled grip on how you think it should go and leaning fully into the mystery. Because the mystery is not your enemy. It is the birthplace of grace. Do not fear the unknown. Fear missing it. Fear becoming so busy, so distracted, so addicted to noise that you never hear the invitation hiding beneath the surface of your life. The invitation to come home, not to a house, not to a person, not to a belief, but to the timeless space within you that has never been touched by fear. That place is still. That place is whole. That place is where clarity lives. And once you live from that space, the world no longer controls your peace. You no longer chase love, you become it. You no longer fear endings, you trust transitions. You no longer resist what is, you flow with it. And in that flow, everything sacred becomes visible again. The ordinary becomes holy. The mundane becomes miraculous. And so the invitation remains, be still. Not because it's trendy, not because it's spiritual, but because your soul remembers the language of silence. And it's time you did too. You won't find yourself in the next breakthrough, the next relationship, the next success. You will find yourself when you stop running. When you sit in the quiet with nothing to prove, nowhere to get, no one to become. And in that sitting, you will hear the oldest truth echo through your being. You are always it. You are always enough. You are always home. So now, as the breath slows and the noise begins to fade into the background once more, you find yourself standing not at the end, but at the return. The return to what was always real, always waiting, always whispering beneath the rush of the world. This is not a conclusion. This is the moment when all the seeking dissolves and only the stillness remains. And in that stillness, everything becomes clear. You don't need to make life perfect. You don't need to fix every flaw or heal every ache before you are allowed to be at peace. You are allowed now. Not after the storm in it, not once clarity comes, but because clarity comes when you stop demanding it and begin allowing it. The stillness does not erase the journey. It blesses it. It gathers every shattered moment and folds it into a single quiet truth. Nothing was wasted. Every detour was a teacher. Every heartbreak was a mirror. Every silence you avoided was a door back to yourself. You ran, yes. You stumbled. You forgot. But the soul never left you. It simply waited. And now you are ready to listen again. And what does the soul say? It doesn't give you instructions. It doesn't hand you a map. It doesn't require that you understand. It only asks that you trust. Trust the pause. Trust the breath. Trust the invisible rhythm that life has been moving to all along, even when you couldn't hear the music. Let the stillness be your sanctuary now. Let it be your teacher, your guide, your anchor, not once in a while, but always. Let it meet you in the morning before your thoughts begin. Let it hold you at night when your fears return. Let it be the space you return to when the world demands your performance. And you remember, I am not a role. I am not an idea. I am not what others need me to be. I am presence itself. And presence does not perform. Clarity is not a light that flickers on and off depending on your worthiness. It is always shining. It is always speaking. It is we who turn away, we who drown it out. We who run, not because we are lost, but because we forgot we already belong. And now, beloved soul, you remember that silence is not empty, it is full. You remember that surrender is not weakness, it is power. You remember that the pause is not the absence of progress, it is the birth of purpose. You remember that nothing outside you needs to change for you to return home. Because home is not a place, it is a presence. And it lives in you, right here, right now. It always did. So walk on, not with certainty, but with clarity. Not with all the answers, but with the knowing that you are allowed to not know and still be deeply, beautifully whole. Speak less to convince. Listen more to understand. Create not to impress, but to express. Love, not for what it brings back to you, but for the miracle of what it brings out of you. You do not need to be louder. You need to be truer. You do not need to be seen more. You need to see more. You do not need more power. You need deeper peace. And all of it begins and ends in the stillness you were once afraid to sit in. Now you know better. Stillness is not where you lose yourself. It's where you find yourself again. Not the self the world taught you to perform, but the real self, the quiet self, the eternal self, the self that does not need to be explained, only remembered. And so let your next breath be not a rush toward answers, but a return to presence. Let your next moment be not another chase for clarity, but a sacred pause where clarity finds you. You are not here to race time. You are here to touch eternity, and you do so every time you choose to be still. So be still now, not because the world told you to rest, but because your soul remembered it could. Let this be the moment you stop waiting to arrive and realize you already have. Let this be the end of searching and the beginning of being. Clarity has come, not because the world changed, but because you did. Because you stopped, because you listened, because you remembered who you are. And who you are is enough. Always was, always will be, and now you know it. Clarity comes in the stillness. And in that stillness, you are finally free.